one way to think about the U.S. immigration system is to think of people in maybe fitting into one of four categories. So if you have number one being U.S. citizens, number two being permanent residents, number three being people who have temporary status here, like a visa or maybe on a visa waiver program, and number four being undocumented people who don't have any legal status here, but they're here. If you think about it in terms of those four categories, when I talk to you today, I'm not talking about number one, U.S. citizens, and I'm not talking about number four, undocumented people. I'm going to leave those out and focus on mainly what we call non-immigrants, which are people with temporary visas or visa waiver program, which I'll talk about if you don't know what that is. And I'll talk a little bit about permanent residents and things that they can do. So those are the things I want to focus on today. In the immigration world, we often use the term non-immigrant to talk about people who are here temporarily. And that might sound funny because, as many of us know, just because you came in on a temporary visa doesn't mean you won't stay here for the long term. Sometimes you will. And so the lines of what is temporary, what is permanent, and what can and can't you do can blur really easily. But generally speaking, we call people who are on a visa waiver program or here pursuant to a temporary visa non-immigrants in the immigration world. How many people know what the visa waiver program is when I say that? Does anybody even know what that is, or am I too drilled down into my lingo already? Does anybody know what the ESTA system is? Has anybody ever heard of that? Okay, so for everybody to come on board with me on what I'm saying, when I say that, the United Kingdom is one of a few countries that is allowed to have its nationals use a program that allows them to visit temporarily without actually going to an embassy or consulate and getting a visa stamped into their passport. So when this happens, it's called the Visa Waiver Program. ESTA stands for Electronic System for Travel Authorization. It's a portal that U.S. Customs and Border Protection built for people to go into and sign in to use the Visa Waiver Program to come to the United States. And an interesting thing about that is that when a person goes through the Visa Waiver ESTA portal and gets cleared, even if you get cleared, you may not be eligible to come into the United States, and that I have seen that enough times to know that people have to be aware of that. I mentioned the eligibility requirements in my handout on page 2. A person using that portal has to have a passport that's valid for at least 6 months after the time they're going to be leaving the United States. If they were previously in the United States, they have to have complied with the terms of their admission. And you might say, well, what if they got in here, or how are they not complying? What it means is if they overstayed, they're not, if their time here expired and they didn't leave on time, they're not eligible to use visa waiver again. And this is something that a lot of people don't think about, but it's true, and it's something people have to be aware of. They have to be, the wording from the CBP, Customs and Border Protection website is, they must not be ineligible to receive a visa. It's the double negative when you think about that. Well, how can they, what does that mean exactly? To give you an example, I had a gentleman from Italy, also a visa waiver country. He could get all the way through the visa waiver portal because of the way questions were asked. He could answer correctly to everything and appear to be eligible, but truthfully he wasn't. The reason is that he had a conviction for possession of cocaine in Italy when he was younger and he was partying. And this was not specifically asked in a way that made him ineligible through this portal, but he could not use visa waiver with that because for the United States purposes, that's a controlled substances conviction. It didn't matter that it was expunged. It didn't matter that nothing like that's happened for years since, that he's somebody who's not going to do something like that now. So when he came to me, he said, I want to use visa waiver again, and I told him, you won't use visa waiver again, but we can get you here somehow, and we can cut down on the wait you will experience at the port of entry. And that I can do. So just because it's not specifically asked on the visa waiver portal doesn't mean it won't stop you from coming here, and people have to know that. Another thing to know is that when you make that entry on visa waiver, it involves a waiver of certain rights that other people might have. So when someone enters with a visa, certain rights, maybe to a hearing before an immigration judge if they're overstayed and they're caught, are not there. So a person who enters on visa waiver who has a problem is not going to get a hearing before an immigration judge. They're just going to be removed. Hopefully that doesn't happen to people, but it's something to know. And lastly, visa waiver is only going to allow a person to enter the U.S. and be here for up to 90 days. And there is not an extension of that, and there's not a way to go from that to something else. So I had someone from the UK who had overstayed by a couple of days because the weather was bad and her flight was canceled, and she tried to leave the very last day she could. It didn't happen. She wasn't eligible to use visa waiver again. It's 90 days and that is it. So when I have companies coming to me saying, well, this person can come on visa waiver and can't I just get them a work visa from there, I tell them they'll leave and we'll do the work visa petition and they'll go to the embassy and get the visa and their passport, and then they'll come back. There's no changing or extending from visa waiver, and people have to be aware of that.